Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Nonprofits. So, how a conservative group's videos gained a foothold in classrooms with the help from Republican officials. So, in a surprising dance between education and ideology, PragerU, the conservative nonprofit renowned for its right-wing misinformation videos, has found an unconventional partner in public schools. With a recent approval from educational agencies in 4 states, including a stamp of enthusiasm from state officials in promotional videos, PragerU Kids cartoon materials are making their way into classrooms. From critiquing universal health care for teens to teaching young children about Israel's Iron Dome, these videos have sparked concerns and debates over potential right-wing biases infiltrating education. As PragerU expands its foothold, the intersection of politics and school curriculum takes far too a common turn. This story comes from NBC News by Tyler Kincaid and Antonia Hilton, published on December 30th of 2023. All right. Controversial topic here, everybody. Okay? Hot take. I don't care what parents teach their kids, even if the ideology is against mine. Because guess what? Though it should be, I am not the arbitrator of parenting, okay? So, that out of the way, I do have an issue with propaganda videos, like teaching children about Israel's Iron Dome. Ooh, that's really compelling content to a kindergartner. That's, that doesn't belong in public schools. This is not why we pay our taxes. So I definitely have a lot more to say about this, but I'm going to take this over to Graham because I am sure he has many opinions about how fucking stupid this is.
Yeah, this is I want to be utterly angry about this, but it raises some legitimately interesting questions. But first, let's talk about PragerU. In the past, they have produced videos opposing transgender healthcare, a topic we've talked about in another segment. They've produced videos suggesting that Americans should say Merry Christmas instead of Happy Holidays. So they've got that religious sort of conservative background that's obvious to anybody that looks into them. But for this PragerU Kids video that we're talking about, they have, as you said, included lessons about why universal health care is horrible and it's worse than the U.S.'s current system, the Iron Dome thing. They even have a segment where 2 time-traveling kids ask Christopher Columbus whether he enslaved indigenous people, and Columbus responds, being taken as a slave is better than being killed, and insists it's estupido to judge him by modern moral standards. That is straight out of the lost Christian playbook as to how to respond when anybody asks them about slavery in the Bible. Oh, well, it was different, and it's stupid, and it's a different time, and being a slave wasn't as bad as it's now today. These are the people that are getting their content in front of our kids. They even did a video with Frederick Douglass, depicting a Frederick Douglass defending the founding fathers for not outlawing slavery. So these are horrible people. This is why people like the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, have described PragerU content as propaganda. And that's really the complaint. This is propaganda. And so what can we do about it legally? That's always my approach. What can we do about it legally? Not much, right? School districts have a wide latitude to decide what we teach kids as long as what they teach is factual. So if they are going to have these videos saying things that are false, and they have made videos, we've had researchers attack PragerU for making videos mischaracterizing their research on climate change to try to prove the opposite point, etc., then we might have some leg to stand on legally. But for now, we need to get political about this. This is a political solution, I think, because we're dealing with propaganda where they may actually say things that are true. I'm educating you about the universal healthcare system, and then I'm issuing maybe an opinion. And because it's propaganda, we need to go to the courts and not the courts, excuse me. We need to go to our representatives and say enough is enough. We're going to vote people out who put this stuff in the classroom, and we may even pass laws about what is and what is not taught as far as propaganda versus education. My background is in the law, and I've got an undergraduate in political science, and it reminded me of an article, a paper I read that was written in 1935. So you can imagine what the world looked like in 1935. World War II, World War I over, fascism on the rise, propaganda being the way that people were trying to win over people for fascism. The article is just entitled Education and Propaganda. And it says in it, quote, propaganda consists in efforts to affect adult behavior. It may be regarded as primarily designed to produce action or attitudes favorable to compliance with action on the part of others. In other words, we can tell propaganda from education because the purpose of propaganda is to produce action or favorable attitudes, right? And so that is what PragerU is doing, and the politicians that are on these school boards that are obviously conservative are going right along with it. What is your take, Jimmy?
Well, I am never surprised that there is kind of this religious undertone to these right-wing groups, and they're never far removed from blatant lies, right? Whenever you bring religion into the discussion, you always have to kind of navigate around something that just is not true. And so these aren't just different opinions, but these are blatant lies that are actually harmful to children. I do have an undergraduate in history, and while I'm no expert, I would be shocked to learn that Frederick Douglass didn't have a problem with the founding fathers' opinions of slavery. In fact, I have a book called The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass, and I don't remember ever reading that he was okay with slavery.
It would kind of go against his whole stance about slavery and what he fought for. Weird.
Yeah, right.
Weird.
So not only are they lying to children, but then they're replacing their education with things that really aren't even pertinent to children. I mean, talking about Israel's Iron Dome, is that really appropriate in a context where you are trying to teach morals? I mean, that's what this is. This attempt with these videos are trying to at least program children morally based on this code that's presented by religion, by Christianity. But are you really in the right realm when you're talking about nuclear weapons and religious conflict, when you start talking about maybe the Middle East and reasons for defense, integrated air defense systems and missiles and bombs and yada, yada? I mean, I didn't get that in first grade, second grade. I didn't get any of that. And it's probably a reason for that. That is a very complex thing to bring up. I do have, kind of this concern that we can't judge what happened in the past by modern standards because they're just moving the goalpost. I mean, we couldn't judge slavery in the Bible in 2000 BCE by modern standards, but now we can't also judge slavery that happened in the year 1500 CE. I mean, when does it stop? Slavery's happening now. Is it okay to judge it?
Slavery that's still happening now.
I know. Slavery's happening now. There is systematic sterilization of groups of people based on their ethnicity taking place in concentration camps in the world today. So where is the line drawn? I just think at some point, somebody has to really make a change. That's going to take one of these people. Like we've had a discussion earlier about a politician who stepped up and kind of turned the corner on traditional conservative policies. Well, it's going to take that kind of introspection for somebody to say, you know what, am I doing the right thing? But this is a money grab as well. So you got to remember that sometimes people really don't even care what they're selling as long as it's making them rich. And I think PragerU is probably benefiting from that greatly. So yeah, that's those are my initial thoughts. Infidel, what do you say?
I would have to say that the person who would be most surprised at Frederick Douglass supporting the founding fathers not abolishing slavery would have to be Frederick Douglass. I think he would be rather surprised to find out he was okay with that. But Prager wants the American education system to resemble how it was generations ago. He thinks there needs to be more attention to character development in schools like the 1930s, he said, minus the bad things. Now, Jimmy already touched on the basis of where we were in the 30s. So when you start talking about minus the bad things at that point, that's a pretty big list. For me, though, how dangerous is it for someone who calls themselves an educator? How much trust should you have in someone who says, I'm an educator, who wants to return to the way we did things almost 100 years ago? I mean, that seems like the antithesis of education is to say, let's go back in time. What does that mean? Is it when people of color knew their place, or women didn't have any control over their lives or their bodies, or gays back in the closet, good Christian values taught in our schools? I'm not sure if I'm listening to PragerU or a typical GOP rally. One thing I was appalled about is PragerU claims that they're in the mind-changing business. And this goes back to something that you mentioned, Cross, is that that's not education. When you're in the mind-changing business, you're in the business of indoctrination. And of course, he also argued that it teaches gratitude for being an American. And I'm not saying people shouldn't be glad to not be in some of the places they could be in, but gratitude is something that you don't just teach. It's something that's developed over an appreciation of actual events, not something you teach in a classroom. Now, but they're getting into these schools through GOP politicians, as this story has pointed out, and we see Ryan Walters. We've covered him before, and he is absolutely thrilled about this. And these PragerU kids cartoons promoting this propaganda material with the idea of right now 4 state educational systems agencies are actually approving it. But first, of course, Helen, being your Florida, of course, I know you're so proud. But
I'm so sorry, Helen.
Someone mentioned the Christopher Columbus video. I watched it again here before this story not too long ago, and he talks about how slavery is better than being dead, and all these little condescending things, and he also talks about how it was good that Columbus spread Christianity. What is the idea of Columbus spreading Christianity as a good thing doing in public schools? I heard that slavery is better than being dead, more calling about other gods being bad, and of course, praising Jesus. PragerU, no. For me, it's more like Prager puke. So with that in mind, barf bag in hand, Helen, are you ready?
Oh yeah, I got some shit. Okay. Besides the fact that Mr. Prager is using the term university super loosely, everybody, like it's a thing. This stuff has already made its way onto college campuses, and there are young people and young conservatives that are eating this stuff up, and it's being used as part of political groups on college campuses. And some of the rhetoric has made its way into classrooms. Now, I don't tend to have as much of a problem with that, because the idea is hopefully with some critical thinking and, ability to decipher this, that, they'll think a little bit more about like the content that they're consuming, or it's their choice if they want to, buy this shit, but what we're talking about impressionable children. And that's where I have a problem, because I know we keep talking about Christopher Columbus, but the motherfucker did a genocide. Like, he just didn't talk about slavery, like he didn't just enslave people. He killed a Polynesian population that went extinct because of him. And the people that, the Europeans he brought over to those islands. So he was a terrible human being, and also a freaking idiot. So just by the way he navigated, y'all, he's just very good at getting the Spanish crown to give him money. So, just going to point that out. Now, my feelings of Christopher Columbus aside, now, I don't know about you, but when I was in school, I remember learning, math, science, English, getting your mom to do your science diorama because it was due the next day and you forgot to get it done, and you con her into helping you out so you get a good grade, like stuff like that, normal things, and I'm really frustrated because this is indoctrination into nationalism, that we don't question Christianity, we don't question question. Oh my God, I forgot how to say that word. Question. Things that are being taught about, you can't question the, greatness of the United States. You can't question Christianity. You can't, question slavery. That's what propaganda is designed to do, to make you fall into one side. Your side is correct, and to adopt these ideas. And these are impressionable children. And I don't think this should be done in schools. Again, I'm not the arbitrator of parenting, but I can't stop other people for what they're going to teach their children. We all know this. But when you're in a classroom, you should be teaching facts, not propaganda. And that's what's so disgusting about this, is that these aren't facts. These aren't about the things that really happened. Because I remember when I was in public school and we learned about slavery, it was not excused. We talked about the horrors that happened and how terrible it was. And that stuck with you. We learned about World War II and what happened in Germany. That sticks with you, and it should. Those are the things that should stay with you when you learn about, the real reality of history. And regardless of religion or not, all types of people do bad things throughout history. And those are the things that we should question and get kids to actually learn what really happened. Don't try to sugarcoat it. Don't try to make it into some glossy picture to push an ideology onto children. And fuck you, Dennis Prager, for putting that shit in front of our kids. And that's all I got to say. Go ahead, Graham.
Well, following that, I find myself in agreement with all of you. To quibble one bit, Helen.
Don't quibble.
I agree that when they are citing their opinions, that is not a fact. But the tricky part, the reason I said this is an interesting story, is you have from a legal perspective, you have two particularly interesting questions. One, who gets to choose which facts get presented in the classroom? Because you can create propaganda by only presenting true statements, but an incomplete picture. I did a story once on the McDonald's hot coffee case, right? Where a lady was in her car, spilled hot coffee on herself, and ended up winning millions and millions of dollars. And the press went crazy with it. And that's what the Republicans said. All of them true facts. They used those facts to convince the country to enact tort reform that damaged every single citizen, right? It limited their ability to recover when giant companies chop their arm off at the factory, or where OBGYNs are severely negligent and your child is now brain damaged for their life. You can only collect $1 million. Sorry, I know they need 25 million for the rest of their life, but you only get $1 million. They said facts. They just left out all this other facts that would give a reasonable person pause, right? That would cause them to go, well, wait a second. These facts make it seem like this, but now when you tell me these other facts, it's outrageous that this lady got as little amount of money as she did from McDonald's. So to wrap up, to talk about their true motives, PragerU, choosing they want you to help politicians choose which facts get presented and then embed these opinions that are implied or stated in the form of these sock puppet conversations between Columbus and some kids and all of that. They are promoting behind the scenes a religious agenda. And to give you an example, I looked up their 2023 annual report. On the cover, and you can go to the PragerU site, there's a link there for this report. On the cover, there is a young child with an American flag running across a field, and below it, there is a quote. You shall teach these commandments diligently to your children. You should talk to them when you dwell in your house and when you walk on the way and when you lie down and when you rise. Where's that come from? Deuteronomy 6:7. And below that, there's letters in Hebrew that says something that I can't even read, sort of trying to further propagate this sort of myth of Judeo-Christianity that was created by evangelicals in the last several decades to try to get more votes from the Jewish population in the United States. So they are on their cover of their annual report saying, Christian quote from the Bible, we are going to teach our children about the 10 Commandments. That's all you really need to know what their motivations are.
Well, they can teach their own children whatever they want, and they can do it inside their own house. I don't see why or how this is even being subsidized by the government, because this is a blatant constitutional violation, in my opinion. I'm no legal expert, but when you have a public funded school that is teaching, lies about history, number one, but also one that is centered on Christianity, then you find yourself in the dilemma of violating that constitutional right where the state is not going to sponsor religion. And to that point, I want to just, point to the Constitution, because regardless of our competing interests, these political parties that are constantly at war with each other are different religions and our different worldviews, et cetera. We are all, despite our differences, American by virtue of the fact that we share an administrative culture via the Constitution. We are guaranteed certain rights. So when we have political opponents accusing each other of being un-American, it would do us well to remember that each of us, despite our differences, are very much American. The problem that we're running into, though, is that these rights don't equally apply to everybody. And that is un-American. And we as Americans have a responsibility to make that work. We also have a responsibility to check each other on how we are bringing our beliefs into the public sphere and remind each other that they belong in their own private sphere. And, that's basically all I have on that. So I'm proud to be an American, an atheist American, and I'm going to teach my kids to think for themselves and not just believe everything they hear.
But Jimmy, their report has a child on the cover with an American flag. I don't understand why you're upset.
Because I was that child once.
Yeah, a good
That's
point.
why.
Listen, Jimmy, it's America first with Christianity and fuck the rest. Okay, just get in line, man. Okay, just get in line. Holy Jesus Christ, on a bike. Sorry.
I mentioned Oklahoma Superintendent Walters, and we've talked about him before. He's been on record saying that the separation of church and state is a myth. So understanding that someone coming from that perspective is so excited about PragerU material coming to school children in his state, I understand why. And I do think that there is a real questionable situation that this article brought out about how Prager's tactics were actually coordinated with elected officials in these states on how they were going to get this passed and how to spoon feed this to the legislature and to get this approved in the classrooms. And that is very unsettling to think that they're taking their views that they can have whatever views they want to on church on Sunday, but when they show up at the office on Monday, those views need to take a backseat to that job, or they need to find a new one. And that's something we've covered here before recently. So that's what my biggest takeaway is. The constitutionality, I get that gray area of you speak half truth and you spoon feed the lie underneath it, and it's okay because, I spoke the truth. Not when you start talking about Jesus, and they literally talk about Jesus, and they literally talk about those other religions that he brought Jesus to them from, and that type of thing. At least I hope that it can be clear cut that there's simply no place in our educational system for this type of discussion or video, or this, what I almost consider a bad version of VeggieTales with a little more religion on top. So
Hey,
with that in mind,
Don't you dare!
Don't you dare! The hairbrush song is my jam. Do not take that away from me.
If nobody sees me on the show next week, you know what happened. And with that, I'm going to be quiet and pass it on to Helen.
Please do. And since you pass it on to me, if you want to know more about how you can, fight for things like the separation of church and state and what we can do to make our schools a better place, check out some new content, yo.